Good evening everyone, my name is Glen Borg and I'd like to welcome you all to this event tonight and to the lovely Newport Surf Club with our fantastic view of the beach. Great to see so many familiar faces in the audience here as well. Just before we start off with introducing some of our sponsors and our panel, I'm just going to ask Jackie to sort of kick us off. Most of you will know Jackie Scrooby. I don't really know if you need any introduction.
I don't know. My name's been around, but you may not have met me in real life.
So, New South Wales MP, representing Pittwater, long time supporter of the Surf Club and our community. Thank you for being here, Jackie. But you do need to run.
I do need to run, so I'm sorry I can't stay. I've said, if you hold another event like this, I'd love to listen for the whole time because, from my point of view, if we're thinking long term, and a lot of governments don't think long term, as we know, but if we are thinking long term, the two major issues, I believe that we're facing is, yes, climate change, which we're relatively across in terms of, we're probably not doing enough, but in terms of sort of understanding what we face. But I do feel that artificial intelligence really hasn't got the attention of legislators, both at a federal and state level, that it should. We're behind when it comes to understanding how AI is going to be an enabler for our businesses, but also the risks that come with it and balancing those two. So the US has done work, the EU has done work in terms of sort of how we regulate AI. But even from the point of the amount of energy we're going to use for, say, data centres, the Australian Energy Market Operator, who forecasts all grid and energy use, they're not even factoring in AI and the amount of data centres that we will be using in the future. So there are big gaps when it comes to policy and legislation and our understanding, particularly from a government perspective or a parliamentary perspective of the impacts of AI. My husband has a business that uses AI, so he generates ads without any humans. And I saw yesterday Adidas has released their first advertisement that's completely generated by AI. You wouldn't know it, no models, no production costs. So in terms of the enabling capacity for business, it's phenomenal. And I think a lot of businesses don't understand what they have at their fingertips. And that'll really take off the next few years. Then obviously the flip side of that is, I suppose, the dark side of AI. There's, obviously ways that we can regulate that with, watermarks and so forth. But, the technology is always going to be ahead of where we're at as legislators. And then I think a really interesting discussion as well is the humanity and what can't you replicate with AI as well. And that's a very interesting discussion. I know some philosophers who are leading in that space. So I'm sorry I can't stay tonight, but I want to thank everyone for being here. This is just testament to the vibrant community we've got in Newport. A special call out to Karen and Simon, who really drive the chamber. We know that we've got so many medium and small sized businesses here in Newport, and this kind of topic and bring people together to discuss this topic is really valuable. So thank you and enjoy and learn.
Great summary. So Jackie's actually given us a great summary, I think, for many of the topics we're going to talk about tonight. As I said, my name is Glen Borg. I'm your MC for this evening. Just a little bit of background on myself, and Jackie mentioned one of the sponsors. I'll mention one of the other sponsors. We've got some simulations running on the TV behind me. So my background is 35 years in supply chain automation. I spent 30 of those years building a lot of the systems that you see on the television behind me. And over the last 5 years I started actually modelling those systems in the virtual environment, really to help organisations working with the TMX group to help organisations make better informed decisions about their overall supply chain, which we all benefit from. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the medicine we take. We used to talk about the little supply chain fairies that just drop it on the shelves in the stores, but it's actually a lot of people behind the scenes making some pretty important decisions about how we get products to the shelf. And it's getting harder. And one of our corporate supporters tonight, TMX Transform, as I said, is working closely with Australian and global supply chain professionals to improve the way they do that. And that's really one of the things that attracts me to the topic of AI, because the supply chain is a huge opportunity for artificial intelligence in terms of making those decisions better and improving the way that we get product to market. And one of the things that really interests me, and I sort of thought about when I was reading John's book, is whether the current approach that we're on with AI is going to deliver all of the benefits that we think we're going to see. And to use John's words, and if you read the book, you'll find out a little bit more about this, whether they're Pied Pipers or whether they're actually missionaries that are going to solve all our problems. So in that, I was sort of introducing myself, giving a plug to one of our corporate sponsors. Our other corporate sponsor is a local, Jackie mentioned before, Simon and Karen. I should say Karen and Simon. That's the right order. Of course. Newport there. And I've got to say, I've personally had a great experience in working in their offices, in particular their co-working environment. And look, Newport and the Northern Beaches are not only a fantastic place to live, but it's an awesome place to work. It's a vibrant community, a lot of talented individuals are working locally, successful businesses. It's amazing who you'll meet in a coffee shop around. It's amazing who you get to work with in a co-working environment. So Karen and Simon have got some great co-working spaces locally, some shared office spaces. You don't need to feel isolated from working at home. You can come in and you can work around a group of people. They've got great flexibility in terms of renting desks for the day, the week, a month or longer. And it's a great place really to collaborate on a bunch of projects with a very creative and supportive team. And not only as a co-working environment, but also for client meetings. So I've had a bunch of meetings in the offices and at Newport Net as well. Karen and Simon have been incredibly supportive in terms of all the facilities that are available in those offices. Everything that you need to run a meeting, impress your clients, and work in a really productive environment. So really encourage you to check out Newport Net and their co-working space and their meetings. The other co-hosts that we've got for this evening. Oh, yes, of course. Well, I was going to come to that. Yeah, most importantly, they pay for the drinks, so they need to pay for your first drink, so check them out. This is my backup. My AI. The other co-host that we've got for this evening is the University of New South Wales AI Institute. Now, we did advertise that we would have Toby Walsh here. Unfortunately, Toby has suffered from a bad case of food poisoning. But you know, I'm told that it's even better. We've got Michael, who's the director for the AI Institute for New South Wales, who's going to step in for Toby. So a little bit more about Michael later on. But I'll just mention the AI Institute's first goal is to promote research excellence in AI and related fields and applications. In fact, they've got a bunch of goals and they're doing some really incredible stuff that I sort of can't take the time tonight to read it all out. But check out their website and you'll find some fascinating information on what they're doing in terms of research. And there's an ex-UNSW mechanical engineering graduate. I was going to talk about the round bar, but I should really talk about the library and all the things that I've learned while I'm studying there, as opposed to maybe by time at the round bar. Okay, so next on my list I was going to introduce Jackie Scrooby, but we bumped her up, so we can really go on to introducing a panel. So what I'll do is I'll ask John and Michael to join me up here. So I might as well get you looking at them when I introduce them. Something about it. I think I'm looking at the first one. Okay. So for those of you that don't know John, and John is the one closest next to me, for those of you that don't know. So John is a cognitive scientist, computer engineer, and author, a great author actually. Ever since collaborating with the AI legend Marvin Minsky in the 1980s over his brain science, and his specialty area has been applying new and emerging brain-based technologies to computers. At the urging of, I guess, one of his mentors, Minsky, John implemented his brain-based models so that machines could comprehend our language. And while the world has over 6,000 languages, he found that there is a commonality, which is meaning. And even as babies, we learn our mother tongue. Yet understanding seems to be something elusive for even the most powerful generative AI models now. So, in his new book, I should hold up the new book. By the way, can you turn your phones off? That's, you shouldn't have got an extra ticket. So in his new book, How to Solve AI with Our Brains, published in November this year, and Beth tells me a great Christmas present for the family. Anyone?
What a fabulous idea. The grandchildren will
That's
love
right, that one. So John talks about the vision to bring trustworthy language to the AI world. So that's John. Now, I did have, I could talk about Toby, but I'm not going to talk about Toby. I'm going to talk about Michael. Yeah. So Michael Thielscher, and in fact, my son gave me that book a while ago, and it really frightened me. It is a great book for Toby. So Michael is the professor of the School of Computer Science and Engineering and director of the New South Wales AI Institute. He's been named the highest ranking scholar, I've got lifetime brackets here, in artificial intelligence in Australia, and 48th in the world, which we're up there by scholar GPS. He's the author of over 200 refereed papers, 5 books with research interest areas well suited to tonight's conversation around artificial general intelligence, cognitive robotics, general game playing, knowledge representation, and intelligent agents. So we really have a great panel tonight. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. I think I have pretty much covered off all our sponsors and all our introductions. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off. I'm going to kick off with 4 questions, and then I'm going to open to the audience, and you guys will get your opportunity to grill our panel. And then, and I'm sure I'm looking at a couple of you that I know that you'll have some good questions. And then we'll wrap up at about 8 o'clock. So my first question is for John, and for those of you who have read John's book, he starts off his book with a great story. It's about free beer. And with the help of Newport Net, he's actually delivered on that promise tonight. So thank you to Karen and Simon for that, and thank you John and Beth for organising the free beer. But and that story is really around when will AI arrive. Okay, but I'm not going to spoil the punchline in terms of the book, other than to tell you we're happy to get a free beer tonight. But before we address the topic of, well, really when AI will arrive, or if it's already here, because I'm sure we've got a broad section of the community here. John, tell us what is AI from your point of view?
That's an excellent question. I've only been studying it for the last 40 years. I spent 20 years looking at how brains work. And if you look at the title of the book, you probably remember when I held it up, it was How to Solve AI with Our Brain, the Final Frontier in Science. I'll stand up and then I can move and then I'll feel better. But the brain is the final frontier in science, the final frontier of science, because it's the only thing we don't know anything about. If you look at the theories that you get from the world's top neurosurgeons, they'll tell you we don't know how the brain works, but it's got something to do with computation. And we can do a lot better than that. In the book I actually explain how we can explain what we see with the brain by simply looking at brain damage and brain scans. So it's a really big deal, because if we understand how the brain works, we can then build machines that emulate how the brain works, which means that when you use Siri, got my phone on. Do you have a Siri phone? So
It's on silent though, so.
yeah, that's good. It's okay, it doesn't need to be unlocked. So if I'm holding up Siri and I say something to it, imagine if it actually understood what I said and did what I asked. And if it didn't understand what I said, it would ask me a question like, what do you mean by movie? So the one I was watching last night. What are you watching last night? Okay, and then it says, we're watching... but can you guys hear me at the back by the way? So if it worked correctly, that's a revolution in technology. Everything that we do can be done with devices. And there's 3 or 4 major problems that are still unsolved. Speech recognition. I don't know if anybody's used the chatbot, but chatbots don't work that well.
Yeah.
Right? And I covered the top 7 things that we want to solve in AI in the book. So, the question is, what was AI? And the answer is, it's whatever you want it to be. If I'm selling something and I've got some sort of technology and I'm selling this phone, I'd say this has AI in it. Why? Because investors love AI and they'll buy it. And we've actually created 50 or 60 different names for AI. So there's artificial intelligence. That was really popular. In fact, when I started in this business, I'd say I've got this AI thing, and they go, "What's AI?" Artificial intelligence is, where machines do what people do. So anyway, that was at the start, and then as we went forward, now everybody wants AI. They also want AGI, artificial general intelligence. That's better than AI. There used to be other types of AI that won't go into that. So that's so I'm going to wrap up what AI is. In 1956, I'm not going to cover the whole history, but in 1956, a bunch of people got together to solve how we can use these newfangled things called computers and replicate the important things that we need to replicate. So, for example, how does language work? We want a computer that does that. What's this neuron network? Is what they called it back in 1956. How can we represent machines that learn? How can machines take things and learn like people do? So they're just looking at basic questions. And you have guys like Martin Minsky and John McCarthy and IBM and Bell Labs. They're all working on this thing. And just after that, AI was named in that thing around June. A few months later, this other group came out called Cognitive Science, and that's my group. I studied at the University of New South Wales a long time ago on cognitive science works, and what you care about is how does the brain work? What are our sciences? So how does neuroscience work? How does philosophy, psychology, anthropology? How do those sciences work? Because you can actually measure them. If I say something that doesn't make any sense, and you're thinking, well, what are you just saying? As a person, guess what you do? What? What do you mean by right? And so that interaction is something which, if you were using Siri, it doesn't have any capability. So on one hand, you've got AI, which is computer scientists working out how they can write programs to replicate them. And on the other side, you've got cognitive scientists saying, how does the brain work? How do we work? And how can we then copy that? And so the two should actually work together. And at the moment, AI is winning. I'll just give you one more piece of background, and then I'll pass over my question. So there's this great guy, and you've probably heard of him, Michael Jordan. Anybody heard of Michael Jordan? He's an American. University of California, Berkeley. Michael Jordan is one of the great professors there. And he explains how AI should be put together. So one way of putting it together is the original model, which is human emulation. So that's what I'm interested in. So everything comes back to brains and emulating what people can do. There's another group that looks at augmentation. So what is it that we want machines to do that's useful to us? And an example is Google search. There's no human in the world that can memorize everything that Google search has in it and say, go to this website for it. So that's a huge part of AI that's extremely important. And then there's another piece which is about complication. So we look at automation. It's kind of human-like. It's a human can work through every step. No human being can run through the process that's involved in it. A good example is Google Maps, if anybody's used that. You want to get from here to Sydney. It's looking at where all the other cars are that are using it, what the best streets are, what the path is. It knows everything. And so those are very special types of AI as well. But those types I'm not worried about. I'm worried about how we can replicate language and speech and the basics of robotics. So we'll get back to that absolutely.
And Michael, and I think the AI Institute might have a broader view of AI.
Well, first of all, obviously someone was very well prepared to explain what AI is. Unlike me, I got the memo 2 hours ago. Sitting here, and then I have to sit in for Toby. So I'm not Toby, and I'm not prepared at all. I can just answer the questions and make up my answers as I go along. As AI researchers, we might have a slightly different definition of what AI is. We try to build systems that replicate intelligent behavior. And it doesn't have to replicate the intelligent behavior in the same way as the brain functions. Whenever we build a system that produces answers where we would say it would have required an intelligent human being to give this answer, then we would call this artificial intelligence. And one simple example is, I know that there are some chess players here in the audience. If you have followed the most recent World Chess Championship, all the coverings, they would always have a machine running in the background that would tell you whether the human made an intelligent move or the right move or not. And that is because the AI system that they use for this purpose is so much better than even the best two human players. But they don't replicate their brains at all. They use very different algorithms, very different systems in order to produce something that is even more intelligent in terms of the outcome than what the human brain can produce. So we are more interested in, does it look intelligent? And if it looks intelligent, then yes, we would say this is artificially intelligent. It doesn't come close to what people generally mean when they talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence. That would be a system that is capable of replicating human intelligence in just every aspect. And we are nowhere near there. As AI researchers, we are looking at specific individual problems, and we try to solve those with systems that produce intelligent outcomes without necessarily trying to replicate the brain. And the advantage is that we don't have to understand how our brain plays chess, for example, in order to come up with a system that is better at playing chess than humans are.
Would you call that narrow AI in terms of playing chess?
Well, we would call it special AI as opposed to AGI, but it is my AI research for the last, not 40 years, unfortunately, but 35 years, has been concerned with looking at existing specialized AI programs and trying to generalize them, to making them applicable to a broader class of games. And you might have heard of AlphaZero, which is the best chess program now that was capable of learning to play chess just by being given the rules of chess. And it didn't require any human programmer to write a complicated algorithm for it to surpass humans when they were playing chess. And AlphaZero was a bit more general than just specific chess programs because it was also able to learn other games like Go or the Chinese variation of our Western chess. And it was still very limited in that it could only learn to play board games with two players that are competing with each other. But at my institute, we have developed this program further to a system where you as a user can invent your own game and you describe the rules of your game, and then you let the system learn to play this game by itself, and it replicates what AlphaZero does, uses the same algorithms, to then in the end be able to play the game that you just invented. And in that sense, this is still far from being truly AGI, but it comes a little closer to what we call general intelligence. That you as a user, you can describe variations of the problem that you want to solve, and the system is able to adapt to it. And ChatGPT, or these what we call LLMs, these large language models, they are a very nice example of this fairly general intelligence that we have as well, because you can just ask it anything. And it's a very good essay writer, for example. You can ask it to write an essay or a poem about just anything. And it can come up with what, if a human would do that, we would call, yeah, this is a really intelligent answer.
I think teachers find it quite useful that they can ask ChatGPT whether it wrote that essay, and then they can catch the students.
No, unfortunately, as teachers, we suffer from the fact that our students don't write their assignments themselves anymore. They are using ChatGPTs, and we have a very hard time to actually prove that they use a system like this. Because, of course, you use AI now to judge whether something has been written by another AI, but the AI systems that do that, they are very unreliable so far.
So we'll take questions at the end, but we'll just, because that's a good segue. I think that discussion is a good segue into our next question, our second question, around the goals of AI. Because I think what you described versus what John described in his book, as the goals of AI, I think it's a good topic to explore. So John, do you want to talk a little bit about what you see as the goals for AI, and then I think Michael can sort of talk about what they are from the institutes.
Well, fortunately, I've had plenty of time to prepare for this.
He's doing pretty well.
He's doing very well.
He's doing very well.
Can you show an example from ChatGPT?
You have even prepared so much.
I just threw this together before the meeting. So, I don't know if anybody can read what's up here, but this is just a panel that's come from a large language model. So this has come from Brave. I typed in 1956 AI data.
Can you speak up a little bit, sorry?
Yeah. So I produced this by simply typing in 1956 AI data. And so it's given me a whole page of stuff. It talks about the Dartmouth workshop. It talks about who went to it. So we've got John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, IBM, Bell Labs. But it also says other notable attendees included Alan Turing.
Oh, wow.
You know Alan Turing? That's amazing that he could go to this event. It was really amazing. And he explored the human-machine interface while he was alive. So he's a great guy to include. And it talks here about machine learning. So they've got machine learning in this explanation of what they talked about in this meeting. So there's two sources of information today. One source is the large language model, and the other source is, say, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is curated by humans, and so there's one level of trust on humans, and there's one level of trust on machines. So Beth, can we go to the next one? So here we go. There's Alan Turing.
I thought so, he was dead.
Died in 1954. So he died 2 years before this, and yet the LLM tells us that Alan Turing was there, and he's a notable attendee, which if he was there, he would have been notable. And guess when machine learning came out? 1959 was when it was first named. So 3 years after the event, we got the name machine learning put in there. So the big difference is that when a machine, an LLM, is doing this work, it doesn't know that this was printed before that, and this person's died before that. It can kind of work out some of that stuff based on what's written in all the documents it looks at. But this is a very different type of technology. So my point is that if AI could do that properly, it's a really big breakthrough. And if you listen to the press at the moment, everybody is really keen that they're just about there. And my assumption is they're not. But that's moving on to the next topic. And
The goals?
the goals. So the goals are human emulation for me, and for Michael, it's a bigger type of AI, but that's the world we live in. I'm focused on these types of things.
Would you say you're focused on 100% accuracy of understanding meaning and language? That would be
Right, I'm
pretty
focused
much.
on to repeat that. So
100% accuracy, understanding meaning and language. That would be pretty much your raison d'etre, right?
Okay, so then the question is, and I described this in the book, and I'll show you a picture in a second. What is AI trying to emulate in the brain? So we've got a couple of pieces. We've got this, and the theory is animal theory, so brain theory. It starts with animals that have evolved, and over 500 million years, you've got animals that do pretty amazing things. So they've got sensory inputs, they've got motor control, they've got the sense of awareness, like thinking, and who knows. And the brain is controlling them. They pretty much do, like if you throw a ball to the dog knows that the ball is a unique thing. And as it travels through space and it changes shape and colour, because that's how vision works, it still knows that that's something that can catch. And if you threw a brick at it, it would run the other way. So we're talking about very intelligent robotic type skills in these animals already. What the humans add on top of it? Well, if you think of it, very complex notions like gymnastics, language obviously is the big breakthrough that we've got over other animals. So Beth, can we just have a quick look at the comparison between animals and our emulation of those animals with robotics?
Wow, Michael, you we're not able to bring anything back.
Okay, so let's start with animals.
He's got videos.
So here's a dog, and what I'm going to do is throw a ball to it. And as I throw the ball, it bounces. It's bouncing behind it. This thing is moving over uneven ground. It's just caught the ball. I'll give you a better picture in a second. It's now landed on the ground. Let's stop falling over. It looks like poetry in motion as you see it come. And there it is with a Christmas jacket on. Put that on a robot, it could cause all sorts of problems. And then here's one, I've bounced it directly behind it, so it's got to turn around 180 degrees. Look at the legs going at a weird angle. It's now covered quite a bit of ground, it's caught the ball. And that's just one amazing dog, but there's lots of them, and there's lots of other animals that have these types of skills. If we could solve that, there's robotics solved for the world. And it's based on that's Linda's dog. Okay, so this is a company that's got $190 million in capital. They're building robots for bipedal work in factories. That's the type of information that it has as it generates its image of the world around it. Here's Tesla. This is very famous at the moment. It's got sensors in its fingers so that it doesn't break the egg. But when you look at it, put it down, that's not how a human would do it. He'd sort of feel the egg going in the cup so you don't drop it. Now, if I walk like that, you'd probably wonder what's wrong with my legs. If you look at this one, you're going to wonder what's wrong with his legs.
This is so much more clever than
By the way, there is a yoga class here in the morning.
But I would advise against
There's a show afterwards where we'll try this out. So here's a robot that's putting machine parts into the machine, but it's set up so that the machine can do it. So you can imagine that robots can be a lot better than machines. Here's another robot walking. So there's lots of, this is like over the last month, the world's top 5 people is robots showing what they can do.
So are you saying this is not AI, this is machine learning?
This is AI, as people would define it. Yeah. So this is robotics AI, which...
Why is it so important for artificial intelligence when they're building robots to emulate the human shape? Like that's you're just saying it walks in a ridiculous way. Why bother creating a machine to be like human when they could just roll it along on wheels?
I knew you would wait.
Why do you think we want to project who we are inside?
Ourselves.
And so
that's all based
it
on
makes
ego?
us more comfortable with
Is
a
it
thing
just
called the uncanny valley.
It's just ego,
Which is when a shape, a face is so similar.
Let's just let John.
I'll finish this, but it's good that we've got some questions for this.
Yeah, we want
Just
don't
don't
forget.
forget.
Don't forget them.
So Beth, can we go to the next one? So I kind of drew some pictures in the air about how the model works, but if you think of a brain, this is the brain theory stuff that I think we need to be better at. There's a brain, it's got context validation, that's the ball, and then knowing the difference between a ball and a brick, and as it travels through the air, being able to track sensors, muscles, awareness, that's the cybernetic skills if you've heard of cyborgs. So that's the thing that could be controlling drivers cars better. And on this side you've got the human stuff, there's a whole bunch of extensions that is basically the same thing, but you can then label absolutely everything in the body, all the movements that we do, all the things that we experience. We've got labels for them, and then there's this nice thing, grammar, that allows us to package it all up in sentences and speak unbelievably quickly compared to any other language. And we can do better mimicking. We can do things like gymnastics. So, you know, if somebody does gymnastics and they have a 3-minute routine, and then, you know, we've got something like 650 muscles. If you can control all of that with balance and not fall over, that's a pretty amazing talent to have. Well, why don't we just transfer that into our robots? Well, I don't have any more to say on the topic, so
Great. If I had known this well in advance, then of course I would have produced very nice videos as well.
a better one.
But I did like the question that you were asking, why would you do this? And the answer is AI researchers, we are not necessarily interested in replicating human bipedal walking mechanisms. So you're right, this is just to show off what we can do and try to work on these to get them to even more human-like walking.
Does that make it more appealing to the general public if we're emulating ourselves as an ego thing?
Well, that is for the general public to judge, but I don't necessarily think it does make it more appealing. So it really is to show what we can do. And walking on uneven terrain, like the dog did, is something that for bipedals is more difficult than for four-legged robots. They are much better at doing this. And there are many more robots that are four-legged than these bipedal robots that we saw here. Just to manage uneven terrain, which is really hard for a bipedal robot, as we have seen. Yeah. But to the actual question, what is the goal of AI? I can give, first of all, an answer from the AI Institute from very different fields. The goal is to produce something good for humankind, for humanity. And one example is self-driving cars. Self-driving cars is, we know the road toll around the world. Toby has the figures, and I'm not prepared. I don't know how many people each year die on the roads from car accidents. But one thing is very, very clear. If we replace human drivers by autonomous drivers, this number would be reduced drastically. We can't guarantee no fatal accidents, but it is very clear that if you, even with the current technology that we have, if you divide the number of driving hours by the number of accidents, then autonomous cars are way better than any human driver. So that is one example, but it is also a very, very difficult problem. And you may remember that self-driving cars was a very hot topic 8, 9, 10 years ago, and there was a promise that it takes another 5 or 6 years and we will see them everywhere around the world. And it is a much more difficult problem than AI researchers thought at that time. So we are working on this, but it is going to take longer.
Just before we go to your question, I think that's a good segue into our third question, which might be related to yours, is around AI safety.
Yep, and we get to that later, so I won't take questions about safety right now. We can talk about that.
I'm talking about what the long chain problem is. Why is it hard to do cars? Because people here won't understand what the long chain problem is, right? Why has Musk been unable to do it? We've got thousands of simulating hours. What is the long chain problem and why is it so hard? What do you want to do with it?
Well, I don't want to dive into this, but in details. But the biggest problem with self-driving cars is they lack the common sense to deal with the unforeseeable unknown. So we can get systems. Well, what I mean by unknown is, first of all, if we play chess, then everything is known. Both players know the chess position and they know the state of the system. There's absolutely no uncertainty. Then we can also very well deal with uncertainty if it is known uncertainty. If we play poker, then we don't know our opponent's cards, so we have that uncertainty. There is that element of unknown in that, but it is the known unknown. We know the range of possibilities that we have to deal with. In real life, we have situations where we have to deal with the unknown unknown. And this is where common sense comes into play, and we humans are extremely good when we are facing situations that we couldn't even possibly imagine. But we face that situation and we come up with brilliant solutions on the spot. And that is something that is extremely hard, if not impossible, at the current stage of AI research to get into our AI systems. That common sense solving problems that result from facing the unknown unknown that we couldn't prepare our systems for before.
If you drive down the road and you see a sofa on the road, you know what to do. The computer won't know what to do because it won't have seen a sofa before. It won't know what a sofa is. We know what it is. We have a little kind of experimentation system in our brain that allows us to see that if we don't do something, we're going to hit it. The computer won't know because it won't know what a sofa is. So something, no, that's not being trained on that. It's the very, very rare, unusual thing that happens. You cannot respond to, and this is the long chain problem.
So do we want to, because that is our next question on AI safety. I think it's a broader topic.
I would like to just add so self-driving cars, just one example where I think if we have them and they are reliable, it would be good for us because we would have far fewer deadly accidents on our roads. Another example where AI these days is very, very good at is medical imaging. Systems that look at medical images, they have a proven record of being much, much better than even a large collection of the best doctors in the world. We talked about this before the panel. What is better still than an AI system is if you couple an AI system with the human being. They together produce the best results so far. But if you leave an AI system alone and you have a doctor competing with it, it is always the AI system that is better at interpreting medical images. That's the second example. And the third example is just my own research, a current project that I have with colleagues from arts and design at UNSW, is we are building what we call skilled AI companions, which is like a chatbot animated on a human-sized screen. And one application that we have for these skilled chatbots is to help children with eating disorders. We have spoken to physicians that treat patients with eating disorders, and they have told us the biggest issue they have is that at the beginning they can see their patients only once a week. And it's almost exclusively teenage girls that have issues with eating disorders. What they really need is someone to talk to 24/7. And not only the girls, but also the families. And just giving them support or asking them, what should I eat now? How do I cope with if my daughter still doesn't want to eat at this moment? And this is where our skilled AI companions come into play. It's a 24/7 digital AI character that has been built on actual people with eating disorders. And you can use this as a companion that helps you through the day. And this, I think, is also a very good, very nice application of AI that actually does help, in this case, the physicians to provide better support to their patients.
Do you want to add to AI safety, or we can take questions from you?
I'll just make one comment, which is, when I showed the example of the large language model using text output, and it looks really convincing, we need to get past that, because if people start believing it and then submitting papers on it and telling people about it, we're changing history. And it would be the first time in human history that we would let something inaccurate creep into our daily operations.
Yeah, that goes back to my point with the best team that you currently have in medical imaging is a human that is able to judge the AI when the AI produces something that is blatantly wrong, like the Alan Turing that we've seen here. And we do get into that safety issue when people start trusting the generative AI system just too much. We all, when we use a Gen AI system, we have to be aware of the fact that in 95% of the cases the output is exactly what we need and is factual correct, but there is the 5% or even less than 5%, depending on the topic that you're using it, where it requires a human to identify the errors that you get. It does not make it worthless because it is the basis that you can work with that you get, and then you have to make these small corrections. But you have to be aware of the fact that these systems do make mistakes.
Yeah, we find the same when we're doing this sort of work in supply chains. The best result is where the subject matter expert uses the tool. The worst result is when someone who doesn't know what they're doing is trying to use the tool because they don't know what to ask, they don't know whether the data is correct going in or the data is going out. So I'm thinking before we ask our last question, let's go to the audience.
Well, I just wanted to ask, because that's a really interesting point you put forward, human expertise. So that's actually known as heuristics, rules that we have about how we operate. And what you're talking about there is the way I want to operate a factory is I've got guys who really know the rules. Yeah. If I want to automate that, I've got to find those rules out. So with AI, one of my friends was into automating coal mines. And as an example, you can't just come in as an expert and do that. What you do is you actually build models around heuristics that the local highly skilled people have, which is, there's always going to be 2 trucks in that car park, otherwise, the whole thing shuts down. So these ideas of rules that we have are very hard to get around, heuristics, and as Michael pointed out, it's really about organisation at the moment. But just on safety, I didn't want to ask about that, because like the EU is doing a whole big thing about safety in AI. Because as we all know, young children, they can be vulnerable, even older people, they can be vulnerable to getting advice which they then follow through, which later on turns out to be a problem. How do we create guardrails? I just asked with Michael, because he's actually got some stuff on that, and I was talking about earlier. Can you talk about the process of putting guardrails inside LLMs and that kind of thing?
We actually, yes, that is a very good point. We do that in our application with the skilled AI companion for example, children with eating disorders. We do use a large language model like the one that you used that produced the Turing escape. But we use this only as a small component of the overall system, and we do have guardrails in place that do judge the output that we get from the LLM before our character actually delivers that outcome. And we do that because we have experts on eating disorders in our team that formulate these rules, and then we check every output that we get against these rules, whether what the chatbot produced is actually appropriate in the current context or not. And we would reject an answer that is inappropriate. So we do try to add these safety measures, and we try to get this as perfect as possible. But with AI, very often we can't guarantee that it never produces a wrong answer in the same way that even if we have autonomous driving cars on our streets, we cannot guarantee that there will be absolutely no accidents. What we can guarantee is there will be far fewer accidents than what we have now.
If I could just ask a follow-up question. So there's 2 giants here, I'm a little people in the middle, so just like these guys really know what you're talking about. But if I can say that Michael's view is broad, John's focused on language, mostly. Understanding language and how the brain works. Michael does a lot of small specialisations like test systems, like a whole load of AI systems which people build which work very well in small domains, like maybe car driving's hard, but there's a lot of stuff that we do now, even in your car, where there's systems there that didn't been there 10 years ago. So there's certainly things that Michael does that John's not interested in. Things like what we call pattern matching, being able to see certain things many times and then just be able to repeat it. And so Michael is a master of that. Where they do actually overlap is the study of language, because John's mostly focused on language, and obviously Michael's also an expert in LLMs. So just getting it onto language so I can kind of compare between the two of you. Where do you see the future going? When you talk to the people here about how does AI become more accessible in your mind? And just from the language side, where do you see that going?
The LLM.
What's LLM?
So yeah, why don't you explain
LLM
that?
is just the technical term for ChatGPT.
Yeah,
So large language.
large language model. There's lots of different
How come
varieties.
you know so much?
Okay.
You've got some.
Don't ask. Don't ask. I'm a
So
nerd, right?
why don't we let Michael answer
Well,
the
he didn't
question
even
and then
pay
we'll go
attention to what I said earlier because I'm not working on specialized systems that
No.
only play chess.
Yeah.
I work on systems that you can describe your own rules of
Yes.
any arbitrary game and they can learn to play this game. So it is not as specialized as very specific for a specific game. But yes, it will always be in a certain context. I'm not entirely sure what I can say about LLMs because my feeling is that they are already very accessible to the general public. They are certainly too accessible to our students because they can just take our assignment questions, type it into ChatGPT, and they always get an almost perfect essay out of it. And then they're not learning anything. And I have to tell them, this goes back to, in the end, you always, at least right now, need a human to critically judge the output of ChatGPT. And if you have never learned to solve an assignment yourself, how would you be able to judge whether the output of ChatGPT is correct? So in the first year, we have to tell our students they must not use ChatGPT because they have to learn the basics. And then later, for advanced students, we tell them how to work together with a system like ChatGPT as co-programming assistant so that they can let ChatGPT solve some of the problems, but then they are able to critically assess what comes out of ChatGPT. But in terms of making ChatGPT more accessible, I think it is pretty accessible, except that it does make mistakes, and we try to iron out these mistakes, but I believe that just based on this large language model that ChatGPT is currently based on, is not going to be the answer. We need different systems that are able to actually understand what the context is in which we are asking a question and that understands the answer that is given. ChatGPT does not understand a thing of what it says. It sounds good, but it doesn't know what it's talking about.
And just flipping that on to John. So what you're talking about here is a stochastic parrot. Parrot is driven by probabilities. It's going to predict what's going to come next. Because it's seen so much before, it's pretty accurate. But it can't be 100% accurate. John, looking at your system, you don't know, your system doesn't know as many words, but it's 100% accurate. Can you explain why?
I think it comes back to if you understand what the sentence could mean, and then you know what the context is. We seem to work with language that only means one thing.
So what you're saying is your language model is different, because I mean, it's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to
Yes,
everyone else.
and the book doesn't really cover much of it. If you look in chapter 2, I cover a whole bunch of examples of how language works. But I don't go into the detail because it's a higher level discussion than that.
All right, there is another question.
Question for you. So you explain how AI is all the good things it can do, like the diet, good problem, medical, brain, so many good things. But AI is only going to be phenomenal in 5 years. So looking at the militarily, AI also can do a lot of things good for the military. But putting bad actors in, how is that going to work? And the question is, can good AI defeat the bad AI militarily?
Michael, you're on that one.
So it's like, is that like the only defense against a bad guy with a gun is a good guy?
No, you know, AI, I'm not going to say countries or whatever, but pretty obviously AI is already being used in the U.S. military already, has been for years. So,
Just checking what Toby says.
can a good AI beat the bad AI, or the bad AI is more advanced if you can good at it?
So it is, yes, this is Toby's specialty. specialty and not my specialty, but I can at least point to one interesting petition that has been signed by almost every AI researcher a few years ago. We all said we're going to refuse to work on facial recognition anymore. And I signed that as well, because as a community, as AI researchers, we thought that facial recognition mostly has bad applications and not good applications.
It's used in China, right?
And it is, yes, it is used in China for their social credit system. And they are extremely advanced in China. They have built systems that in a football stadium with 80,000 people, if they use cameras, they can identify individual people in these 80,000 faces. And this is something that we couldn't do 10 years ago when we signed the petition. And we didn't want to work on that because we don't think there's any good that comes out of this facial recognition. But you can see that something that we wouldn't support still happens. So it's not something, even if 99% of the AI researchers in the world, they said they wouldn't work on that, it is happening. This is not a military application, but you can quite easily use that for military application. It's not out of the question that you take a drone, you arm the drone, and you provide the drone with the photo of a specific person, and that drone is capable of hunting that person down. And then it makes a mistake, because it mistakes one face for the other. And then we do have applications that we absolutely don't want and that we absolutely don't support, but unfortunately, this is something that is not out of the question even with the current technology.
Can I give you so AI is based on...
Can we just get a couple of other questions before we move on?
I'm just going to ask a small question. The existential risk to humanity from AI, because I think we all accept that it will become vastly more intelligent than us, it's only a matter of time, in which case it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to be a lot more powerful than humanity. What are the implications and what are specifically the serious sort of existential risks to humanity?
I think that might actually, that might go, that is a very small question indeed. That might go to your last question, when do we have AGI?
Yeah,
I think the last question we had. We are not anywhere near this point which some people call the singularity, where we do have one AI system that can solve every problem better than a human being. So this is not something that I'm too worried about at the moment. This is not something that is around the corner. It's really arming a drone and giving it a photo of a particular person. This is a very specific and very nasty application, of course, but it's nowhere near destroying us as a human race by taking over the world.
Well, I would never think AI would go and destroy humanity, but I suppose what I worry about the risk of something that's so much more intelligent than us. It's, maybe compare the intelligence between an AGI in 100 years might be the same between our intelligence and an ant. And that makes us as humans seem very insignificant, rightfully very insignificant. We don't really have much thought in our day-to-day lives. So if that scenario happens in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, that's an interesting scenario.
That was one of the good science fiction concepts from the 1940s. Isaac Asimov talked about the 3 laws of robotics, where robots can't harm a human, and then there's that sequence of things that he wrote lots of books about. Because we don't have intelligent machines today, predicting what an intelligent machine in the future will be able to do, you would think that the people that are working on that will also build in safeguards that are necessary. So fundamentally, other than a whole bunch of tech CEOs saying at the moment that these machines in 12 months' time are going to be so much smarter than us, if you leave those people aside who aren't scientists and you just focus on what you can do, I think we're pretty safe for the foreseeable future.
I can only give some analogies. For example, the fact that computers are so much better at playing chess now hasn't ruined chess world championships at all. There was a fear 15 years ago when chess computers became better and better that people said, oh, then humans will stop playing chess. But the opposite happened. If you look at the current or the most recent World Chess Championship, it got an even larger audience, partly because there's now a machine that can tell everyone immediately what was a good move and why it was a good move and what was a blunder by one of the players. And people find that more relatable that they now have that machine explanation immediately, and they find these matches more fascinating than ever because of that. So it is not necessarily the case that if a machine gets better at some specific problem, that will have these very drastic effects on humans.
Well, Michael, I don't think you are disadvantaged at all by not preparing. Thank you so much, Michael. That was fantastic. And Toby, we didn't miss you because Michael did a fantastic job. But
You did a good job too.
we got everyone else has been talked about, so all our sponsors, because they does and did such a great job. But I would like to thank you immensely because yes, this did start from a conversation in the Becco coffee shop, not Patterson's Brady. Thank you very much. He gave you his credentials, his professional credentials, but he's a great human being as well. Glen's very well respected.
Thanks, John. Very nice.
It's very nice.